All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, residents of South Sound, Walkers Road. Um, we just want to welcome you here this evening to the joint NRA RCIPS community meeting, where we will just kind of update you on some of our plans that we have, and then also take questions concerning any of your issues that you have, community issues mostly. Um, Before I get started, I just want to welcome or just acknowledge our chairman, Mr. Aldrich Lindsay, who's over to my left. Thank you. And then we also have Miss Anna Pecorino, who's also a board member of the NRA. And then I have a few other staff members and colleagues, Miss Marion Pandui and Mr. Denny Tebow, uh, who's actually the author of a lot of these maps and stuff that you see. So he's in our transportation planning unit, both he and Marion. So welcome to all of you. Welcome to the officers of the RCIPS who will introduce themselves very shortly as well. So I just want to open up tonight just by saying that we wanted to just briefly outline some of the national priority projects that we have going on, especially those that impact a lot of the residents of South Sound and in Georgetown in particular. As you know, a lot of the issues that we're having currently with traffic have to do with the lack of road capacity in the Grand Harbor area and heading eastward. So one of the main projects that you will see us have actually taken an active role in getting started is the Linford Pearson Highway. And we've put a drawing here for you, and we've also had stuff on our website and has been publicizing that quite recently, just to kind of get everybody to have an idea of what's happening with that project. So we're here to answer any questions you have on that. And you will see us, we have been doing a lot of work at the Grand Harbor roundabout. That roundabout in particular, in fact, the roads in that area are basically in flux. So you will see a lot of changes as we go through the years and stuff, because it's a part and parcel of a larger plan to expand the road network. And right now, so you'll see us add lanes and then extend lanes and make changes in terms of the, the, the pedestrian safety and so forth. So we'll talk a lot more about Grand Harbor as we go in the next coming months, because we're actually about to commission a full traffic study of the area, to look at all of these things in unison. So not just being able to move traffic, but also look at the pedestrian issues and also have issues with the buses and so forth, and how we can get people back and forth, especially like between Hurley's and then the properties on the seaside. We also have with us too. We also have a plan that we're looking at for the Walkers Road section, potential widening of that. Now, these plans are basically based on a survey that was done back in the 70s, the Boundary Plan 9, and we'll be talking more to the residents about that and how that's going to impact them as we go along. So that's still in a lot of its design stages, like you would say, sort of preliminary design stages. A part of that will also be a traffic study that we will look at for the school districts. So in particular, Prep, Catholic, the John Gray area, we will look at how we can improve that whole traffic circulation in that area, because I know that that's a major concern for a lot of parents. And that's really it in terms of the major stuff. We also have Marion on hand to help you with any issues you may have with things like traffic calming, speeding in your neighborhoods, speed humps, those types of things, potholes, sort of the run-of-the-mill issues that we deal with. We'll be more than happy to address any concerns that you have with that and take your requests. So with that, I would probably just, if there's any questions right now, or maybe we just open it up to the police just to say a few words, and then we'll do more of a Q&A at this point. Yeah. Okay. I think there's a mic somewhere you can use this stuff.
Okay, thank you, and good evening for having us. With me is Sergeant Pompey. from the CPD department, and Sergeant Montague, also from the Community Policing Department, and also Sergeant Butler from the Traffic and Management Unit. So we're just here to support you all and take any questions from from the audience, questions and complaints, and certainly we'll do our best to address them. I know that we've had previous meetings in the South Sound community, and speeding was one of them. So no, we've done a number of operations in the mornings and in the evenings to try to curtail that. So if that is still happening, then certainly please let us know. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, we'll open it up for questions. If there's any particular questions, anything that you see here that we're proposing, or just any questions and concern in general that you have concerns about roads in your community.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So, how much discussion has been given to the bridge across the North Sound?
Okay, so I kind of expected to get that question today, and we've, like I told someone before, we've got all sorts of these sort of weird and wonderful ideas about causeways and stuff like that that we could do in Grand Cayman. But one of the things that we've certainly had to do is to kind of weigh the cost of all of that. So at this point, it's more of a financing issue of, how would we pay for something like that. In fact, just today I was looking at some of the causeways in Florida. A lot of those that go from Miami over to South Beach area and stuff like that. So we're looking at the Juliet Tuttle Causeway and a couple of the other ones, and they cost about $6 million per mile, which is roughly 5 or 6 times what it would cost, what it currently costs us to build a road on land. So you can see that if you were to kind of do any sort of causeways in Grand Cayman, you're looking at probably, that's in U.S. dollars, and that's where they've got a lot of the materials readily available, like the concrete and then all of the heavy machinery. So we would have to factor in those costs as well, being able to bring all of that here and then build. So if I had to take a really educated guess, I'd probably say it's probably 7 or 8 times the cost of building on land, to do causeways. But it's not out of the realm of possibility, but certainly something that we will definitely have to look at. Yeah, Denny's smiling because he knows we've looked at a lot of those in the past.
Okay, so I have 2 points to make, and they're both related, so if you'll bear with me. Great job what you're doing there at the Hurley's Roundabout. I can see you guys are working very hard there. It doesn't matter, of course, it's no secret how much work you do there. It won't get rid of the bottleneck, right?
Absolutely.
And if we plan to continue developing the eastern districts or even Red Bay, people are going to have to get through there. And the majority of the people don't want to be in South Sound. They want to be in town or West Bay Road or Camana Bay or something like that. Maybe they can drop their kids, but they're really just trying to get around the airport and get into town, correct?
Yes.
All right. Most people don't want to see another road through South Sound. So we've got this gazetted road corridor going through South Sound that really should be dedicated as a bicycle path jogging trail to connect up all the neighborhoods and make all of South Sound and all of Grand Cayman a nicer place to live, right? So if we can not have that next road, you spend far less money. You don't have to build a road, you just build a bike path jogging trail, so that's going to cost less. And I recognize it's not a comparison between the cost of a bridge, but the bridge is inevitable in the future.
I agree.
You're going to have it. So why force this road down our throats? Why not just make something really nice there and get started on the bridge? And you do it as a, of course you're going to have to probably take out a loan, but you pay it off as a toll bridge, and see what would people stomach. But instead of sitting in all that traffic, because I lived out there long enough to know it's worth the money to get where you're going and back home in the afternoon. So the bridge would incorporate lobster and fish habitats in the pilings.
Yeah.
So you would turn what is currently a dead zone into a thriving marine habitat, which is going to help the diving industry, help the fishermen, and just everything, right? So the way to do it, at least I think, is to widen Hurst Road and go through what is currently where the marine boat launch is there, right? And that's the start of your bridge, and it comes in between Camana Bay, CIS, and the dump, right?
Yeah.
So it's a fairly short bridge, pre-constructed pilings and bridge sections barged in and dropped in place on a hard pan bottom. It's not difficult, right?
Yeah.
Probably, yes, expensive, but you pay for it with a loan and a toll. And don't make us have another road with a bunch more traffic with people that don't want to be there in the first place. They want to get from point A to point B, right? And that's all I got to say. That's it.
Yeah, understood. Yeah,
okay.
and let me add this by saying it. Well, I'll address it in two parts, really. The first one is the South Sound bypass, which you alluded to, and in I think Danny was 2005, 2006, we drew the South Sound bypass as an alternate corridor, and so it's a part of our sort of what we call long-term corridor plans. And what has happened over the years is that it has been amended as needed, and we certainly have been looking at the, I would say, the purpose of the corridor. So we don't just see it as a road to move traffic, but we see it as a road that would blend in with the environment, as well as we know that we have a huge stormwater issue and that will actually be exacerbated as all of these developments come online in South Sound. So we see it also as a potential conduit for stormwater in the future, and that's one of the areas that the government on a whole has to look at as well. So you can imagine, if you're familiar with a lot of the places in Florida and so forth, a lot of the highways have drainage systems alongside of it and so forth, and drain in through canals and different things. So we have currently a stormwater committee which will be starting to look at these things in sort of as a whole. So yeah, we don't see it as this 4-lane, 6-lane highway that's moving all of this mass amount of traffic at this point in time. Certainly not. And we have seen I think what's called the nature trail. Yeah, so we've seen that, and we haven't had a lot of discussion about it at this point, but we certainly will take a lot of these views under advisement. And as you know, everything has to be approved by the politicians, by the cabinet and so forth. So it's one of those things that we will certainly take a lot of the recommendations of that on board, and the public will be involved in a lot of this discussion as well. I think you mentioned actually the same causeway that you mentioned. Oddly enough, we actually drew that one day on the thing where from Hearst, and we did this. What if you did that? From Hearst, basically Newlands, Barcadere, and then go over to Camana Bay. And then we realized, okay, well, there's also the airport extension, which is another issue as well. So I know that the CIAA have been looking at options, whether to expand the runway inward, which it gives limited options. So one of the things that they're looking at is expanding into the sound as well. So we kind of have to see how those two would work together. But yeah, that's been in sort of our imagination, as you would say. So good comment. Any other questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of detail as to what is planned on Walker's Road as it goes in front of the school? Anyone who goes there at 2:30 or at 8 o'clock in the morning or 2:30 in the afternoon understands that it's a 2-lane.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of traffic coming in and going out, as well as stopping on the side. There's parking on the side of the road. Clearly, the road doesn't accommodate the volume of traffic that's there.
Right.
But the 50-foot corridor, I don't know how that's going to necessarily help that, other than allow that traffic to get to the congestion faster.
That's absolutely right. So that's the thing that's baffling us the most because yes, we've had suggestions like okay, put a center turning lane down the middle, but that actually would make it worse because what you're then doing now is allowing these right turns. So it'd be similar to West Bay Road, and then with all of the driveways and the different things, then you can imagine people turning in and out at will. And in some places they call them suicide lanes because you've got cars coming at each other and then deciding to turn right and so forth. Um, we There's a number of different ways that we know we can approach this, and we're reaching out to some consultants who actually have a lot of experience in dealing with traffic impact studies around schools and so forth. But one way in particular would be to find a way or find ways in which the entry points to those schools are not on Walker's Road per se. And you've sort of seen that coming into fruition with the John Gray High School, where they now have flipped their campus and the entry point is going to be off of Olympic Way. So where you currently, where a lot of where we, well, when I went there, where you entered was by Fat Motors and so forth. That's going to be the rear of the school. So the entry is going to be around. So we're looking at prep and Catholic in particular and seeing how that could happen. I know there is Marion's quite familiar with that because her son goes there, but I know they've had proposals to try to create entranceways onto the road by the church and different things like that. So it's really those types of combinations of ideas that would happen. And then the other thing is to can we move the school? Things like that. Can the school move elsewhere and stuff like that? So those are things that because you'd imagine if the school continues to grow, student population wise, it's only going to get worse. And you're right, a 50-foot corridor basically whatever you do to it isn't going to solve the problem in particular. So it's a very complex issue, and it's one that we're gonna have to try to look in detail at. So yeah, yeah.
Currently, there's only 2 or 3 exits. So
Mhm.
you either go north into town, you head south down to South Sound Road, or
Yeah.
you go aspiration out that direction. And it all gets concentrated back because all of them are releasing on the Walker's Road.
Correct.
And because the traffic kind of depends on itself, you can't move into one unless somebody else moves, and they can't get out of the way anyway. So coming south from Georgetown at 2:30, there's a stack of cars lined up, waiting to go into prep or Catholic to pick up, and they can't exit because the car in front of them is still congested.
Yeah.
Until you widen up and make it where they
Yeah.
can't park, or you use an alternative site for pickup.
Mhm. Yeah. So actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one of the other things that we discussed with the board in terms of having some sort of alternate pickup site or even some sort of pickup drop-off area. And we had looked at one or two properties in particular, but we haven't gotten any consensus on that yet, whether those properties can be used. But that's certainly one idea. The other thing that has come up in the past is, and I know it's difficult for the private schools, is busing. Because different from government schools, private schools, what we find is that what do you call that? The attraction basically is spread out. So we find that private schools, you may have students that actually live in East End, North Side. They live all over. So trying to find a bus system to accommodate, the pickup and the drop off of students is difficult. One way it can be done is I've seen it with another school in West Bay. I think is you can have collection points. So you could say there's a bus that waits for those students at Hurley's or something like that, or somewhere outside of the town, and then the students are there, and then they're collected and then taken to the school. So that alleviates the issue of those parents having to drive to Walker's Road. So all these types of things are ideas that we can discuss with the schools to see how that works. But that's would be on them to implement that, and I know they have other issues, because that's going to cost money and different things like that. So I've seen that work in other places where they have actual collection points for students, and then the buses themselves go in.
Hi, good evening. Um, obviously, I mean, maybe you can lease the land on Walker's Road, but obviously, if you're going to try to acquire land, that's going to cost quite a bit of money. There's been a lot of calls. I'm part of the committee that put together the Tarpon Alley Nature Trail, which involves a route in order to do a cycle route to the schools on Walker's Road. You're talking a lot about having people drop off children in their cars. A lot of the kids that are at school on Walker's Road are cycle, right? So they're high school kids. My kid is 14 years old. He's cycling to school. He goes through the lakes, but he has to come down a short stretch of South Sound Road. We would really, I mean, you would get so many kids. If you could connect a cycling route that starts in Prospect, Red Bay, can bring all of those kids on bikes. You also now have e-bikes and scooters. I don't know if you've seen the kids. I mean, they're all trying to get on these things, right? You could have a charging station at Hurley's. Parents could drop their kids off at Hurley's on their way in from the east. They drop their kids there. You could have like a supervised bicycle route, or like someone who picks them all up, gathers them all up, and then off they go on their bikes. Obviously, you're going to have days that it rains, but then maybe that day you're going to be in a traffic jam. But, you know, we have been asking for this, we've been suggesting it, and it's something that I think could be implemented. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's a wonderful idea. And actually, as you were mentioning that, I remember how I got around in college when I was at Champaign, because they have a lot of that. They have actually dedicated bicycle lanes. And what they did on campus too was they actually took the central lanes of the highway, and then they cordoned them off and actually made them dedicated bike lanes. So you actually cycle down the middle of the road and then you cross at certain points. So those would be things that, if there's the political will, and, you know, enough persons like yourself would push those ideas, and we put it up the chain and see if people are receptive to it. But you're absolutely right. I've noticed a change, a trend, even at our workplace and even in my own household, where the kids are really gravitating to the e-bikes and the e-scooters and so forth, and they're getting around a lot on those. And so it's really the whole concept of mobility is changing in terms of, and they're gravitating to those things. You know, you and I probably wouldn't be too eager to ride those, but it's amazing how the younger kids are really receptive to those modes of transport. So when we talk about share the road concepts and stuff like that, those are the things that we need to start to marry into our road designs to accommodate these different types of mobility.
Yeah, well, I think you have the community support. I think, you know, there's been Facebook posts about it, there's whole chat groups about it. So I, you know, if there's any recommendations in order to move it up the chain, and if you need support from the community or ideas or even from landowners, I don't know. I mean, what would it take to actually get that going?
Yeah, I think even meetings like this are a start, and I think more of you know, coming to us more and also speaking to your different representatives. You know, I think that's something, because it's also an education process as well. Like, you know, so you're educating them. This is what's happening in other places, and it could work here. Are we willing to try it? And I as you were saying that, I was just, you know, I mentioned the center turn lane or the suicide lane. You know, what if that were a bike lane instead? You know, a dedicated bike lane down the center, and you can get the kids to and from school and stuff. Because you're right, a lot more kids are riding and have the ability to ride. I used to live just on Fairbanks a few years ago, and I saw a lot of kids cycling to school, and you know, back and forth from school, even in the community that I was in. So it would be, you know, it'd be important for us to provide safe cycle, not just cycle lanes, but cycle paths, and they don't have to be along the roadside. They can be through different communities or through different areas, as long as they're built in a safe manner.
Out of interest, do you know what the population is of all the 5 Georgetown districts, and how many school kids might be in that?
I know Marion knows that because she actually did it. We did it as a part of her study in 2015, 2016. We actually were doing a traffic analysis when we were putting our traffic model together. So she actually knew, like, and she knows, or she used to know, all of the folks, the number of buses, and she knew where all the bus routes were and everything. So that a lot of that information is built into our traffic model. So there was a very extensive study that we did, and so we have that information. Yeah. So Denny was saying that we reached out to the ESO, the Economic Statistics Office, and we actually had them add a number of questions in the census that relate directly to traffic, travel, and all this sort of stuff. So you will get asked some, probably what you would think were weird questions, like where do you live, where do you work, how do you travel, these types of things. Those questions were put in specifically for the NRA to help us to look at trip distribution, trip planning, and so forth, so that we can kind of know where people are going. Yeah, like that's basically what Denny was saying, is that so we have, once the census is complete, we will have a better understanding of travel behavior, where people are going. We tend to look at it as in terms of home, work, home trips. There are those direct trips, and then you have like home, work, school. There's different modes of travel. Some of them are leisure, different things like that. So those questions are going to help us a lot in terms of knowing the travel behavior or travel patterns of the residents. Yeah, hi Ella.
Hi, sorry, I just want to say for the benefit of the community,
Yes.
I was asked by the South Sound community on group chats on Facebook and privately to put forward a petition to the NRA board for sidewalks and cycle lanes, which I did do. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows I have done that. Mr. McTaggart has also put in a letter supporting the proposal, and I've also given to the board screenshots of everybody in the group chats and on Facebook who actually specifically wrote to us supporting the proposal for safe walkways and cycle paths. So if there's anything else that the community needs to do in addition to that, then please let us know so that we can put together whatever we need to put together in order to make this happen. So thank you. As far as possible.
Oh, so I was saying, how far would the bicycle lanes go? Are they going to stop, turn on to Walker's Road and go to the school, or do they continue on South Sound?
Yeah, that would all have to be looked at, because even when you get into parts of South Sound or even South Church Street, you get narrow spaces and stuff like that. Yes, exactly. There'll be a lot of discontinuity in some places.
A big part of this problem is solved by that gazetted road corridor that I'm staring at right there. Okay, it goes all the way from Hurley's, right? All those new places. They're going to have kids growing up there.
Yeah.
So my kids started their life on Bel Air Drive, and it's a little bit frustrating to hear that meetings like this are a start of that conversation, because I was suggesting it before they were born, that road corridor should be a bicycle path. And now they're going off to college, and they missed out on that. All right, so you got a whole nother generation of kids growing up, and the solution is to just do it. Just go ahead and make a bike path where you have a road corridor already, and that gets everybody where they want to be safely.
Yeah. I would say this to you all: if you ever, most of you will probably be familiar with Amsterdam. You can Google it quite easily, and you can see their experience and how long it took, and what it took politically, in terms of political action to get where they are today. And basically, just to kind of frame it in a nutshell, is that they're a society that's about 45-50% bicycles. So there's not, in terms of cars. So Cayman is a lot similar to a lot of the U.S. places where we're probably what we call car-centric. So you've got 90% cars, 95% cars. But it took a lot of action, committee, a lot of voices, to protest and say, look, we want to change our city, we want to change the way that we travel. And and today, and it wasn't easy. It took a while, and today when you go there, you actually have roundabouts and different intersections that are specifically, what would you say, the cyclists have the right of way over the cars, more or less. But that took a while. That there was a lot of effort that went into that. Yes.
Sorry, just quickly. I actually went to school in near Utrecht, Beeldhoven.
Yes.
I went to school on a bicycle.
Yes.
I'm over 50 years old. So we're not talking that that's a new problem. They've been cycling
that's what I'm
for
saying.
a very long time.
It started from like the 70s, but it was a movement that took a while to implement. And they also have a good transit system as well, as you would know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you don't have 90% cars, and it's not car dominant. It's not a car dominant society.
Sorry, can I just make one point? This is not something new that we're asking for in South Sound, because we've actually got cycle lanes, but they're not real cycle lanes, because people regularly cycle along the side of South Sound Road. People walk along the side of South Sound Road. The only thing we don't have is anywhere safe for them to do that, because cars park along the side of the road, builders park their cars there. So there are obstructions in the road. There's also potholes. The side of the road is not safe for people to walk on or to cycle on. So we're not asking for anything that we don't already have. People are using the sides of the road for walking, for cycling, for hitching rides, for stopping buses. So it's already there. All we need to do is basically make sure it's safe. That could be by resurfacing it in a different color, by putting in a sidewalk, by putting in some partition, by putting in some different street lines, but they're already there, they're already being used. This is nothing new. So
we'll move on from the subject, but just I can't remember in the plan Cayman, but this is not just something that from my perspective that I'm asking for Georgetown, but this would be for all districts. Like, I think one of the things that we should be moving to, which I'm pretty sure we are trying to move to, is we're trying to create communities. And within those communities, you need to have safe, friendly environments so like if you take Savannah, there should be nice park spaces, there should be cycle lanes, there should be walking spaces, there should be friendly pavements that you can take your elderly grandmother for a walk, or that you can take them out in a wheelchair or something like that. I mean, we do not have that type of community planning. So hopefully, I don't know if that's, I mean, if that could be something that could be implemented, like an actual adopting a streets policy or whatever, like a complete plan, like a complete street, I think it's called, or that would be something to launch across all districts, I think.
Agreed, yeah. And I think a lot of that is being covered or to be looked at in Plan Cayman. Yes, but I think I can't remember the term that they use, but I know that they're going to look specifically at communities and how to make those, more increased quality of life and make those more safe and friendly. Yeah. So then he was saying that connectivity and stuff, I know, is a big part of that. But yeah, it's really it's a good point, and it's a question that you need to kind of pose to the director of planning, because it falls under the whole Plan Cayman.
Is that still active, Plan Cayman? No, yeah, so it's back to the drawing board. So I mean, it would be great if maybe the NRA could pull out that and you run with that. That's my suggestion. Yeah, otherwise we'll be here till... No,
mind you, I didn't say no. I didn't say it wasn't.
No, I know, but
it's a good question, and it stumped me for a minute, because I was like, I don't know. Yeah. But I would hazard a guess that it is.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, could I please ask our director?
Yes.
Along the road, Anna spoke about safety. How are we going to get that with all the construction cars and vehicles piled up on the side of the road? Are you responsible for that? Is that planning, or what is the law regarding that?
Yeah, so that kind of falls, I guess, twofold with planning, and then partly with the traffic management panel. and I know we've had discussions about this before, and it's really an issue of, and in fact, I was just in Northside tonight, earlier today, and we saw a lot of that as well. So, as people are building and you're getting these new condos, then what do you do with the construction traffic? Because
We
there's a lot
shouldn't
of
have
work
cars in the first place.
yeah. So that's something that I know that we'll be speaking more with the police and with Haroon, because there has to be something that can be done. I think from the planning level, as well as these developments are getting their planning permission, and ask, and find out ways whether there's areas where they can lease additional parking areas, or there's vacant parcels around. How do you deal with the construction traffic?
Well, when we were growing up, the contractors would get their men all together. They'd meet on the post office. They'd come out by our building,
I remember.
and then they transport them.
I remember that.
So you need to consider going back to that and making it law. But I mean, they're parking right up on your lawn and your everything. They're taking your fruit, and it's not right. And nobody seems planning blames NRA or traffic blaming traffic, and nobody wants to take responsibility. So how can we work in getting that done?
I think we need to all work together and figure out how to do that, because it's a concern I hear a lot, and I've seen it, I've witnessed it in South Sound, and like I said, in Northside, in other areas where there's so much development going on in Cayman, and you see it. In fact, I was just speaking with Sandra this week about what's happening at the Ritz-Carlton. You see a lot of the construction traffic. They're parking in the bike lanes along West Bay Road and stuff like that. So it's happening all over the island. Yeah, I don't know. I think it has to be a
Mr. Police
collective
officer,
effort.
you listening? Maybe you can take it back to traffic for us.
Brad.
Yeah, thanks. I actually brought this up with Mr. Pandui from planning earlier this week, because we did get a complaint from a community in West Bay along the Northwest Point Road of the same, or very similar incidents. And as each construction site goes down in the districts, you inch closer and closer to structures that are already there. So some companies are doing it already. They actually have a site, a parking area, even if it's a short distance away from the construction site, and then they bus their workers to and from the site. So I think this is something that we definitely need to look at going forward when submitting plans to planning department. What is your parking plan for your?
Yeah. What is your management plan for construction?
Yes,
yes, absolutely.
But yeah, but we take on the areas that is mentioned here. We certainly look after that at the earliest opportunity. First thing in the morning, actually.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No worries. You mentioned twice, once in passing, talking about Amsterdam and then talking about buses. But I'm wondering what plan there is, or where transit that is not based on vehicles like buses and whatnot plays into when looking at this, because any support structure that you want to give, whether it's to bicycles and kind of making communities more friendly and everything else, and it's just and obviously there's a lot of the former discussion from previous MLAs, when they were still MLAs, talking about what had been gazetted as spaces for an actual potential sort of lane for public transportation and all of those things. So where does that fit into this? Or are we still looking at solving our traffic issues with roads? And that's something that kind of because that's never going to be resolved. So where are we looking at this from that perspective at all?
Yeah, there's parts of that I can answer, and then there's parts that I can't, because some of it falls outside of our remit. I can tell you that there's when you talk about transit or public transport, it isn't just buses or big buses and stuff. There's many different ways that you can manage that doesn't involve vehicles that are carrying a lot of folks. There's things like Uber and Lyft and all those systems that are working in other places. There's ride sharing concepts as well. But I think it's going to take a lot of these efforts, different efforts together. There's also COVID has taught us a lot as well. being locked down and then having to be innovative has taught us a lot. E-business, e-commerce, different things like that. So it's forced us to change our driving habits, and I've seen some companies have continued to implement that. Before COVID, you didn't have a large usership of bento and let's eat and all those types of things. So going forward, those are the types of things that we're going to have to look. E-government is another one. Government I know is making steps in terms of that. So why do I have to drive into town to do certain government business? I can do that stuff electronically and stuff like that. The part that we do control is what we're starting to do is look at our corridors in terms of when we plan the corridors. We're not just looking at them as having 4 or 5 lanes, 6 lanes of traffic. We're saying, okay, here's a corridor. How can we best utilize that corridor? So let's just take the east-west, for example. It's probably 150, 160 feet wide. Out of that, just have to be dedicated bus lanes or even carpool lanes, things like that. What if, it's a pretty straight road. What if government of future years decide that they want to do something like a light rail transit or something like that? Those are things that can be implemented. We talked about how in places like Amsterdam, where they took out travel lanes, car lanes, and actually put in different types of multi-use lanes. If any of you have a chance, you can Google bus rapid transit or BRT. It can be a high-end way of doing it, and you can do very low-end ways of implementing bus rapid transit. And basically, all it is you're taking dedicated lanes for buses and you're running them up and down the lanes as if they were train cars. And so they work with schedules and different things like that. There's lots of successful applications in Los Angeles and also in Brazil, Curitiba, Brazil, and other things like that. So the traffic problem in Cayman is forcing us to have these types of conversations and to look at ways in which we can best utilize our corridors in even the limited space that we have and the future roads that we're planning. When I went to school 20 years ago, engineers of my caliber, we just kind of looked at highway and moving cars and a lot of cars and stuff. But the whole thing is changing now. So it's all about mobility and providing accessibility and catering for different modes of transport is really what it's all about. So we're fully on board with that. In fact, we've done presentations to community groups like yourself about different ways in which that can be implemented. Yeah, our NRA is in support of those measures. Yeah, sorry, Danny? Yeah, there's a lot more that he can test, is what he was saying. So with the model that we have, we could actually test. I'll give you an example. So with our model, what we can say is, okay, the car population is, or the vehicle population is 40,000. How do we keep that there, or how do we just allow sort of moderate growth of the car population? And we can put in things like, okay, what if the transit share was 10%, 20%, 30%, and kind of model that. The other element to that too will also come with planning. So as more developments come online, the planning department, CPA, has to look at, okay, as these plans are brought forth to us, what are they doing to accommodate buses? What are they doing to accommodate cycle lanes through the developments? We're seeing a lot of pad developments come into planning. So the question is, how intently are they looking at how people are moving around in those communities? Is it just streets just for cars only, or do they have the roads planned in such a way that bicycles and these e-scooters and different things can move around safely within the community?
Sorry, let me just to clarify. You said you can model the way in which you could see with that. So what would it take? Because the way that I see it is that we have 20th century problems, but we're looking at them with 20th century solutions.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, so what do we get to, in terms of being able to, in other words, would the NRA be able to tell us, for instance, because now we're talking about school traffic and all these things, right? And so if we were to I know that there was a discussion about using the middle rail that starts off from Linford Pearson right there by, I guess where Fairbanks and Bobby Thompson Way kind of starts, going all the way up. Yeah. So if you're talking about creating something like a light rail or something else along those lines that goes as far as that can take, and what, based on the community needs, to be able to give us tangible data and information as to what that would mean as far as alleviating traffic and whatnot in the morning. And if you were to put, the park and ride places in along the way, so that people would be able to come in and you'd minimize that traffic. And for the odd people like me who are actually going against traffic to drop my kid off at school and then picking up traffic on the way back, so it's like those kinds of things. If we have the capacity to do that, it helps people to conceptualize what this will actually mean in terms of the benefit. How do we get that information so that then we can start pressuring our elected representatives who are sitting at the back there and listening to all of this? Yeah. So it's like, so because we need that information to create public pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and these things can be done. The thing is, too, you also have to consider the cost and how it's going to be implemented as well, because a lot of these ideas won't happen, in a 4-year cycle. So it would take like even with the Amsterdam example, it took champions to really say this is where we're going, and this is this is how we're going to move in the future. But yeah, we certainly have the NRA has put itself in a position where we can answer some of those types of questions and actually look at that. One of the things that we can do as well is, and I'm not offering to do it tomorrow or in the next few weeks, but we could do a full build-out study based on the zoning. So with all of the the current development plan, the commercial, residential, we can actually look at that and say, what if Cayman were built out at the density that the zoning allows, and that would then allow you to kind of see, kind of the worst case scenario for Cayman. But yeah, we have a lot of work it already now. So
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure if NRA would be able to answer this, but have there been any sort of decision or talk or plans on not on importation of vehicles because of lack of roads?
Yeah, we've certainly suggested it, and I will say that I know that this government and previous governments have discussed that intently, and I know there were committees formed to discuss it, but that's about as much as I know. I can't really comment any further, but I know that that is one of the considerations, and I know we also forwarded information to the government on some of the disadvantages of doing that, because without certain things in place, like proper transportation and stuff, then it becomes an issue of social equity or transportation equity, as we would like to say. So because I'm of a certain income and I live in East End or North Side, and you're going to limit cars to certain people, you've probably heard some of the political arguments, limiting cars to expats and different things like that. So it's not an easy fix, and it has to be done in the right way. But I know there's enough examples out there where countries have tried it and they've had successes and they've had failures with that. I'll give you one example of a failure with that is I won't mention the country, but when they started to restrict cars, then you started to get a lot of chop cars. So you got people were taking existing cars, so they weren't allowed to import the cars, but they were still allowed to import parts and different things. So you were getting people cutting up cars, and basically you were getting a lot of unsafe vehicles on the road. So these are all sort of negative consequences to putting those types of drastic measures in place.
I am aware that you have some businesses who drive around and pick up their employees. Yeah. That could be something that can be considered as well for, just a troll there to pick up a meeting point to pick up their employees. It would sure help with the traffic.
Yeah, even years ago when I joined the Public Works Department, we actually had a shuttle because a lot of our guys used to live out East End and North Side, so we actually bought a van, and I think we used to call it the Pink Elephant. It was a van, and we actually would have one person drive it and pick up a lot of the workers, because I think right now we're probably 15% of our staff are from the Eastern District. So you can imagine all those people are driving in to Public Works or to the NRA compound. Then they have to pick up the vehicle and drive back out to jobs, but could be in West Bay, East End, or wherever. So there used to be those types of efforts, and I can't tell you why we stopped, but you know we don't do that anymore. But I can remember when I joined 20 something years ago that was something that we used to do. So I know of other businesses that do it as well, and I think if more businesses did that sort of thing, it would help.
Sorry, Ed. I apologize if I missed the beginning of the presentation. I don't know. Did you go through the actual road network?
No, we just mentioned that the maps were there because we had did like kind of little people were looking around. So we will allow that at the end as well. You kind of just browse around and then ask questions as well.
So I was just wondering because I can't see from here. I'm familiar with the east-west through the wetlands. Do you have a north-south road on there at all? For the south connected, like so from the new, if the new road gets built in the middle, where the
so they're sort of between Linford and the South Sound bypass.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple places that we had identified on there, and over the years we've had to alter them based on development and so forth. So there's a couple times we've had to change the north-south connectors. One of them is Agnes Way. So as you come from Jose's Esso and then you coming out of town and come into that big roundabout by Mangrove Point, there is a proposal to extend that further to meet the South Sound bypass. So that would be one of them. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get it all the way to South Sound Road. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was
further
wondering,
east.
Is there anything coming down to South Sound Road?
Denny would be the best person to ask. He's shaking his head yes, and he'll show you after.
Is that the one near Conk Drive?
Which one? Near
Is
what?
it near Conk Drive?
Conk Drive, where's that?
Not sure where Conk Drive is.
So on the other side of Vela, if you come across, is there a blue line there?
Yeah, to the west of that. I'll show you after.
Yeah, he said he'll show you after it. Yeah, remember these are long-term corridor plans, so
is that gazetted though? So
under the long-term corridor clause in the Roads Act, so that's section 26. Yeah, so it's not a there's different clauses by which different areas where we gazette roads in the roads law. So whenever the intent is to open a public road, so basically ready to build now, so then we do a section 3 of the law of the act. This one is more for long-term corridors, so it's a section 26. So it's it takes on a different type of connotation in terms of what we call a future road. So it's a future road plan, but not a plan that's ready to develop within a short period of time.
But so one of the things I've noticed is, so you have the long-term roads plan. You have asked developers to set aside land to facilitate that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens is a developer will come along and say, well, actually, no, I don't want it. And then it gets shifted here and shifted there. So it's a little bit hard for us to, if you're living in the neighbourhood, you think there's a plan, you think there's, a proposal, and maybe even you buy your property, and then all of a sudden the road changes because a development is going in. And I'm just wondering if anything can be looked at for that, because
yeah, that's a very fair comment, and it's happened in not just in the South Sound, but in other areas as well. And it's one of the things that we've talked about amongst ourselves is how do we get more protection for these sort of longer term corridors. Now there is a section of the law of the act that allows you to
if somebody is affected by the long-term corridor, they can trigger.
Yes. So if someone is affected by this long-term corridor, you can trigger a Section 3 gazette. So if it's an instance where think where the land is blighted, or if in certain instances, then it can trigger the Section 3, so government can move to that. I don't think we've implemented that only once, only one time. Yeah, but that is a very fair comment, and we try not to let that happen, but you know, there's the powers that be, the people with more authority than us, and sometimes we've had cases where we've said strongly to the CPA or others, please help us protect this corridor, and then development gets approved, and then we have to try to meander elsewhere. But very good point.
Just going back to the lady's point there, and what I'm hearing here, you've mentioned Amsterdam and other places which actually has millions of people living in it. I think we actually have, I think the census said what, 65,000 people here?
Like 69, I think they're averages.
My understanding, and it's been called for a lot, is to have a needs assessment. We talk a lot about, you know, I mean, we've been sitting in these meetings for a very long time, and you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job planning these roads, but what are we planning them for if there's no actual plan and there's no needs assessment to know what you're planning for? You know, are you planning for the next Amsterdam, or are you planning for the next village? It's really hard, and to set your goal so high and just start building roads with no actual idea of, yes, you can say all that land can be built on, but that doesn't mean that it's actually the need, right?
Yeah, and it's a fair comment again, but I would say this in terms of how the situation that we're in currently is, we see it as we're playing catch up in terms of, because right now we have, let's just take the West Bay Road corridor, for example. So we've solved the traffic congestion issue in that sort of, you know, section of the island. But we know, based on a lot of the development that we're seeing forecasted, especially a lot of the things that we know that the DART development could or could not do, may or may not do, I should say. We have to take that seriously. We have to consider that those are possible outcomes. So we have to reserve the corridor for that. So I always tell people, like, don't get too scared by the lines that you see, because if we put a 200-foot wide corridor on a map, it's because we know a lot of things that are being planned. You know, a lot of developments. Now, so a lot of them may not come to fruition, but we know that developers come to us all the time and say, look, here's our pad, here's what we're planning to do with that. The other thing I mentioned too was that based on the zoning, we have to respect the zoning, the land use. So if an area is zoned for hotel tourism or is zoned for commercial, we can't ignore that. We have to say, okay, what is the potential build out of that area? And so we do have large tracts of land that are still like that, that have zoning that we know could potentially invite. South Sound is one of them. But then he's pointing to South Sound. South Sound is one of them that I would say probably 15 years ago we were like, might happen, might not happen. And then along came Vela, along came San Sebastian, along came Vela. You know, it's just like, it just kind of grew up overnight. The other issue I wanted to, before I lose my train of thought, was we're intently looking at the eastern part of the island. And we know that the way that the zoning is set up is that most of the employment is in the town area. So it's forcing, again, trips. It's forcing those people that live out there to come into the town area. So one of the things that we've been impressing upon the planning department and the people who are doing Plan Cayman is, how can you decentralize, or how can you create another center or area of employment that helps those people out east? So there has to be some commercial, neighborhood commercial types of development out in the eastern area, that they don't have to drive all the way into town. And you can get a mix, you utilize your corridors better. So in the mornings, you're seeing 4 or 5 mile long queues coming in, but not a lot of people going east. The highways are empty going east, right? So how can we get that balance? So you get that balance through the land use, how you plan your zoning and stuff like that. So if you have more commercial out there, more, as Denny always says, meaningful employment. My sister is fortunate enough that she works out east, so she's, while I'm stuck in traffic, she's going the other way and laughing at me as she crosses in the morning. So we want to see more of that, and that has to start with land use. So when you see us, a lot of what we were saying, what I was saying earlier, is that we're playing catch up, because what we're trying to do is, with the resources that we have, that the NRA has, is we're trying to widen and stretch and scratch out every inch of real estate we can, so that we can get more traffic moving, more capacity. But we know fully that that's not the solution. That's not the end final solution, because we always say amongst ourselves that you can't build yourself out of congestion, and we know that to be true. So we know that there's other ways and means that we have to look at. So it has to be a balanced approach to solving our transportation issues, because the more roads you build, then the more traffic you invite, and then you also um, create this sense that, oh, it's okay, NRA will build more roads, so we can go ahead and get more cars, bring in more cars. So that's the reality that we grapple with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, hi, Ms. Burnett.
Since we're dealing with South Sound, I have a question about the corridor there with the plan that's proposed. There is a road that is proposed to come out behind the tennis club onto the South Sound Road. And is that coming off of that corridor? Why do we need that? That is prime residential area. We already have traffic in there with the 3 sports clubs. And why would that be coming off there, and why does 100 houses, in addition to what we have now, have to come off of South Sound Road? Is it just because they can market their property and say, oh, you have access on South Sound Road?
Ms. Burnett, the chairman and I have just been hearing about this, and we don't know. I think Denny.
Well, I see the plans because I'm living up in there.
Yeah.
So
it's something that we're.
That's more between Cayman Enterprise. They're trying to negotiate the right of way.
Yeah, so why does Cayman Enterprise have to come on to South Sound Road?
But that's between them and Paris Cove. It has nothing to do with the NI. They're trying to get an agreement with them.
Yeah, Denny, if you can use the mic, or you just come in. Yeah. So Denny is our transportation planner, so he knows a little bit about, or heard some about this road.
What Cayman Enterprise are trying to do is negotiate a right of way with Paris Cove Limited. That's between 2 landowners, not the NRA. As part of the Cayman Enterprise, when NRA made comments to the planning authority with their pad development, is we told them at some point they would have to do a traffic impact assessment. They're not at that phase. All they've done is phase 1A, which is about not even 10% of their development potential. The discussion that Cayman Enterprise is having with Paris Cove is a private matter. It's between right-of-way negotiation. It has nothing to do with the NRA. Well, that's, again, if Paris Cove doesn't want it, they can say no. They approach you guys through a right-of-way to negotiation. If Paris Cove doesn't want it, they say no. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. So then it's not a part of our road plans.
It's not part of our roads plan.
Yeah, it's not something that we're planning.
Well, again, they would have to do a traffic impact assessment. Those were our comments to the CPA.
Yeah.
And
So
again, it's a phased development. It's a 40-year project.
Yeah. So Ms. Berna, I heard Marion over here whispering that it actually hasn't gone to planning. Yeah. So the proposal hasn't been to planning. Yeah. I personally, I heard about it today. Someone mentioned it to me as well. But
Sorry, this is just a question, because this is the first I heard about this was today as well.
Me too.
If they do go through the various phases and everything else, and they do this traffic impact assessment, then does the NRA have the opportunity to comment to the CPA in the usual way with all planning applications?
Yes.
Okay, so we wouldn't necessarily pass it, and it would come to the board if and when that happened.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just wondering, because the first I've heard about this is today. So it would come to the board?
Yes.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we still wouldn't have planning.
The NRA is only an advisory.
Okay. Any sort of final questions? I think we're it's getting close to 9 o'clock now, so.
On the actual South Sound Road, the reservations on the side, obviously starting up at Hurley's, moving down, have been widened in certain areas. How far are you intending to go with that?
Okay. You'd be coming from coming off of Grand Harbor into South Sound, or?
Yeah, so I think you know, you would say the road reserves have been widened, possibly up to Vela.
Yes. Yeah. There's a 50-foot corridor, I think, up to about there, and then it South Sound then becomes 30 again. Yeah. So it's a tricky one in terms of, you know, even in terms of, because obviously in the 30-foot section it would be very difficult to widen anything there. So yeah, we've always been faced with that issue where I'm not exactly sure where it is, but then, you know, it's after you pass, I think it's shortly after you pass the jetty, or and then it becomes a 30-foot road again. Yeah,
so it's still a 30-foot road.
It's still 30, yeah. So you can see where that would be very difficult to do any sort of major road improvements. Certainly not at any. It would certainly be at great cost.
Yeah, unless we had the road going up to the side of Vela, one side or the other, leading into Tarpon Alley. So if we had cycle lanes from Hurley's down to the jetty and then lead them up Tarpon Alley and somehow find a way to get them down to Walker's Road.
Yeah. A road or a bicycle trail or both?
A bicycle trail or both, whatever works. But the most important thing is just to make sure that more cyclists can actually get there so we have fewer cars.
Yeah, Denny's shaking his head. Yes, it's possible. So. Yeah, something we could look at.
So one last thing, as we do have the police here, we do still have speeding on South Sound Road. The main road, yeah, the whole road. I mean, yes, they're slowing down now at the boardwalk, and then literally they take off after the boardwalk, and they just Roy had a meeting for us at the South Sound Community Hall, and this was discussed at length how we can try to mitigate crazy drivers on the road. I mean, it's just, there was a horrendous accident with 2 pickup trucks just by the Crow's Nest spot there the other day. You know, we talked about potentially reducing the speed limit. I know you can't patrol the area all the time. We've talked about restricting, putting, I don't know what it's called, to slow down traffic. But it's still really bad. So, you know, and I know, I mean, we've talked about, the one thing that was suggested is why could we not have a monitoring system, like a speed camera system that we actually all, it's called a residential community. It's like, so like it's a neighborhood watch, but it's with cameras, right? It is legislation you could pass that the neighborhood community could do, but there's a problem apparently with taking our data and then the police prosecuting that way. But I mean, even that could even just be a bridging step to sort of highlight who the people are. I mean, you get their license plate, right? And then and that would be something. I don't know what you think.
We've discussed a speeding camera system, as the other countries in the UK, for instance. It is a huge infrastructure to put in place. So I think a short-term fix really is for us to just police the South Sound area. Once we, that's why the reason why we came here to sort of find out if that was still happening. But we did put some police officers in the mornings where I think most of the problem was happening on intervals. So I think that did help, but certainly, something for us to look at again and on a regular basis. But just got a question. Take off my police hat and put on my audience cap. We know that there's only so much we can do with the roads coming into Georgetown, but there's only so much space. But the late Bo Miller always spoke of go east, and you touched on that. But what is I'm just wondering, what is the real feeling for creating that infrastructure out of Georgetown to alleviate some of that traffic coming into Georgetown?
Yeah, we're certainly pushing for it. And like I said, a lot of the effort's going to come now from this Plan Cayman exercise. I know we've been asked to comment. I'm not sure what phase the plan is at now, because I know it's been, from what I understand, it's been divided into different phases. Marion, if you want to, maybe you know a little bit more than I do, but I know that in fact we actually went as far as drawing certain areas where we think, we would suggest where it should be done for commercial. You probably remember there was, I don't remember how many election cycles ago, the government was talking about decentralization or even of government services and so forth. This is long before the government had been building, but we've seen sprinklings of that. The first sort of big step was actually the Clifton Hunter High School, and then we saw like some of the other little areas, the agricultural department and different things like that, move out into the eastern areas. And I think we'd like to see government certainly take the lead on that and put more of the government types of services out east, as well as e-government that I mentioned as well. I think e-government has a big role to play in a lot of stuff. You shouldn't have to drive into town to get a police certificate or a police record or something like that. Different things like that. Different services that you would do on a daily basis. Things like that can be done electronically. But yeah, we believe in that needs to happen. It needs to be more employment out east to balance out the trips.
We did see some efforts. We have the licensing department over in Breakers.
That's true.
And those other things.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask a question to the police? Thank you so much for patrolling in the mornings. That's great. I take my son to school around 7:15, 7:30. There's usually somebody there. However, what normally happens is, as I'm leading up to where the police check is, I have about 15 cars flashing at me, warning me that the police is there. Yes. And it happens all the time. So that's great. It stops, it slows people down. But how about actually doing something to these guys that are flashing other guys? Maybe have a patrol in one stop and then something else further down, so that you can actually disincentivize people to entice other people to speed. I don't know whether that's good or bad.
That's the problem that we have throughout the island. So we have one car in South Sound, one on Estimate Tibbetts, and one on Linford Pearson, and it's all the same thing. Yeah. I won't say it on the radio or on the air, but we can speak after. Yeah. We do have some difficulties with that.
That reminded me about one question that my mother actually asked, so I may as well ask it while you're here. The dump trucks honking their horns. They just seem to honk their horns to say hello to the guy on the other side of the street. She's an elderly lady. She says it absolutely freaks her out on the road, and I would hate for her to be startled so badly that she would have an accident. I think there should be something to legislate that should not be allowed, because it's unnecessary. I don't know why they're honking their horns like that.
There is something in the Traffic Act that's excessive use of horn. It is.
Yeah, she's 79 years old.
Yeah, but I saw a young lady walking to work the other day, and a dump truck got right next to her and went, wow! And she almost had a heart attack. Yeah. I almost turned around and went back to check on that lady. I just saw her freak out. It was so bad. She had to wear could even jump over the wall and we know where to go.
I think it's a ticket,
It's a no, sticker situation because how would you know it would be a misuse of horn? It could be someone trying to stop someone from getting an accident. You got to look at it in all different ways. Yes, we have nuisances about the place that we just do it for fun or to get the attention of a nice lady walking the street or something. But how would the police be able to detect that that was a misuse of horn? I think it all. Yes, dump truck I'm talking. I think what needs to happen, the police presence plays a big role in our communities. If they are seen or they're expected to be there, we have less stealing because they know police is there. You have a lot of things diminish because they know and they see police is there. We had a meeting with the new acting inspector of over neighborhood, and that was one of the things that we put to them. I think we need to have our officers back on feet in our communities. It makes a difference. It does. Police presence does make a difference.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howard, before we leave, I know you mentioned you were getting time for it, but if I could maybe just change things a little bit, just to ask and plead for you for a bit of help for the people who live along Fairbanks. There is a genuine need for traffic calming devices in front of Triple C School. Now, I had been working with Tristan in the ministry, and they had put down the strips. And they didn't work, and they were subsequently pulled up very quickly. But he promised that there were some other things that could be looked into, such as these tabletop rolling speed bumps, you know, that would to try and slow traffic down. The second thing is need for crosswalks in front of the school itself, because I'm told that there are a lot of residents in the neighboring surrounding communities whose students do walk to school, and there is, you know, it makes things a lot safer for it there. So those are two areas. I know down from all along Fairbanks, children are walking to school, to the government schools and to their private schools around. And so there is need for some attention in that area as well. So I just plead to you for it, and as I had done with Tristan, and was promised that it would be dealt with.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Marion's nodding her head. Yes, we'll look at that. One comment I wanted to make on the rumble strips, so the strips that you see us put like at a lot of the roundabouts. We've been getting requests from neighborhoods for those, but we're finding that they're not a successful traffic calming measure in neighborhoods, and it's not to do that they don't deter speeding; it's the noise element. So we had put some in the location that you mentioned, and we had the folks at the Ambiance and other places said they sounded like freight trains. It was horrible, yeah. And we also did it in West Bay, and we had the same result. We literally had to take them back out within days because they're very, very noisy, and you're hearing that 24 hours a day because you can imagine sleeping and you're hearing this noise all night. So we had to quickly remove those. So we're going away from those as any sort of a traffic calming measure in residential neighborhoods.
Sorry, Roy just reminded me, somebody texted me earlier this evening to ask if I would mention some safety crossings by the three-way stop near Field of Dreams, because apparently a lot of children go from Triple C, they walk down to the Lions Pool, they walk down to the playing fields there, and they haven't got a safe way to get across the three-way stop, and also to get into Field of Dreams.
Yes.
Thank you.
As the police is here, people don't use that as a three-way stop. at all. The three-way stop is a constant right there by between where Field of Dreams, what they're talking about. So whatever you're going to do, you need to take into consideration that there's a safety issue because people don't stop and don't actually utilize it as a three-way stop. And it's just like, so there have been multiple near misses there with cars because they think that once they get there, they can just go however they want. So it's just like, so it's whatever aspect of facilitating access for children needs to take that into consideration because it's just a horrible aspect.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think we also went as far as adding the flashing stop. I can't remember if we actually did that. I think we added that.
Yeah, so people still drive straight through.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, just to address something that Mr. McTaggart was saying, what he's saying is actually needed because it's something that we also talked about on the board. It's in addition to the crosswalks and the stuff you're talking about, is to also do a sidewalk along Fairbanks, which I think Ms. Conley's also talked about in the past. So it's something that we are trying to talk to landowners as well to see if we can get their consent as well to use part of their land because a part of the road goes into some people's properties. So you're trying to get people's consent to extend sidewalks and then to connect to both sides because children cross the road all the time to do the pedestrian crossings like you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think, certainly the corridor looks to me wide enough that could easily be able to accomplish it. Maybe just that you need to acquire land.
I know you want to go, I just have to put my sustainability hat on here and ask about the products that you're using for the roads. Any consideration of changing to more environmentally friendly, so reflective heat? There was something else that came up that Miss Anne over there had mentioned. I cannot remember what it's called, but something that Florida looked at apparently for earthquakes and things, where the top coating doesn't crack, but it's more like an elastic kind of thing. I think it was. So yeah, any ideas to revamp alternative products?
I think it's a great point, and I think we certainly, it was about a couple of years ago, just before COVID, we actually attended a big conference in Tampa where they showcase a lot of the products, and I know they were talking a lot about these different, even things like the paints and the thermoplastic that we use. So there's a lot of companies that are looking at these types of products. So I will take that under advisement and we'll continue to look at different types of. Oh, yeah. He was talking about sort of like recycled asphalts and different things like that as well. Yeah.
I think I'm thinking more from a heat perspective.
Yeah, from a heat. Yeah. I understood that part. Yeah. Yeah, I know some places they're even changing the color of the roads and everything so that because black there's a lot of heat. I know they're going with a grayer pavement, and even I can't remember where it was. There was a country they're using white pavements. They're actually, yeah. So yeah, so greener pavements is something we'll be looking into.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Superintendent, acting superintendent, if you wanted to say anything before we close out.
Just to let the audience know that we've taken notes of all the complaints and the areas, so we'll certainly address those at the earliest opportunity.
Yes, and we'll say the same as well, and we certainly thank you for attending tonight, and it's been a good discussion on a lot of different topics, and we'll certainly take a lot of what you've said under advisement, and we'll continue to do more of these types of meetings so that we can engage with the public and kind of let you know what we're planning and some of the issues that we're having as we plan and try to manage roads as well. And I guess we could announce the next meeting, which is next week. Have we confirmed that? Okay, so Wesleyan Church, West Bay. Oh, Windsor Park. Okay, yeah. So next week's meeting, Thursday, is in Windsor Park at Wesleyan Church. So we'll.
If you want to know the one after that, Wednesday, 30th of March, 7 p.m. in West Bay at the Church of God at West Bay, Captain Reginald Parsons Road, Mount Pleasant, West Bay. So that will be the last one in West Bay, and then there's the rescheduled one in Borden Town on April the 7th at Webster's Memorial Church Hall. But we'll be posting all of these dates and times. And apologies for this evening's short notice. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I just want to bid you all good night. And before I'd be remiss of me not to acknowledge MP Roy Big Taggart and Mrs. Barbara Conley as well. Thank you all for coming. So with that, I would say good night. We'll be around with the maps and plans if you want to just have any questions for the NRA team for just a few more minutes. So good night to everyone, and thank you for coming.